In the glittering heart of London's 1815 social season, the most powerful duke in England stood accused of manipulation before a ballroom of 300 witnesses. The woman who challenged him wore a dress worth less than his morning tea, yet she held more power over him than anyone in the empire. What happened next would shatter society's foundations and prove that sometimes losing everything is the only way to win what truly matters. If you're watching from New York, Paris, Tokyo, or anywhere in between, stay until the end to see how a man with unlimited wealth learned that love cannot be bought. Hit that like button and drop your city in the comments. Let's begin. The chandeliers of Pemberton House blazed with 1,000 candles, their golden light spilling across the polished marble like molten honey. Outside, the London streets were still damp from afternoon rain, but inside, the cream of English society swirled in a kaleidoscope of silk, jewels, and carefully orchestrated ambition. The spring of 1815 had arrived with unusual warmth, and with it, the season. That peculiar marriage market where fortunes were gambled and bloodlines bartered beneath a veneer of waltzes and champagne. Sebastian Darrow, the 7th Duke of Ravensbrück, stood against the eastern wall with the posture of a man enduring a particularly tedious military campaign. At 32, he possessed the kind of dark, angular handsomeness that painters beg to capture and mothers thrust their daughters toward with desperate velocity. His evening clothes were impeccable, black coat tailored to perfection, white cravat tied with mathematical precision, sapphire cufflinks that cost more than most families earned in a year. Everything about him spoke of power, privilege, and profound disinterest. Your Grace, might I introduce my daughter, Miss Arabella Winters? A woman in peacock blue silk materialized at his elbow, her smile bright enough to illuminate the room without candles. Behind her, a young woman with practiced curls and a carefully blank expression waited like a soldier before inspection. Sebastian turned his glacial gray eyes toward them with the enthusiasm of a man examining tax documents. Mrs. Winters, Miss Winters. Arabella is an accomplished pianist, the mother continued, undeterred. She speaks 4 languages and has read all of Byron's works. She would make an excellent— I'm certain she would make someone an excellent wife, Sebastian interrupted with surgical politeness. If you'll excuse me. He moved away before the woman could marshal her forces for another assault, navigating through the crowd with the ease of long practice. This was his existence now, an endless parade of eager faces, calculating mothers and daughters who looked at him and saw not a man but a title, an estate, a fortune estimated at £50,000 per annum. He couldn't remember the last time someone had looked at him and seen Sebastian. Still breaking hearts, I see. Marcus Thornfield appeared beside him, champagne glass in hand and mischief in his blue eyes. As the Earl of Ashford and Sebastian's closest friend since Oxford, Marcus possessed the rare privilege of speaking to the Duke without strategy or ceremony. I'm merely existing, Marcus. They're the ones inventing narratives. You could try being less devastatingly wealthy and titled. That might discourage them. I've considered it. Sebastian accepted a glass from a passing servant. Shall I donate my fortune to orphans and take up farming? The orphans would appreciate it more than these vultures. Marcus scanned the ballroom with practiced cynicism. Though I suspect even as a penniless farmer, you'd still have them following you with marriage licenses and hope in their eyes. That bone structure is damnably inconvenient. Sebastian didn't respond. His attention had snagged on a figure near the terrace doors. A woman in a dress the color of autumn leaves, simple and unfashionable in a room full of elaborate confections. She stood alone, watching the dancing with an expression of detached curiosity, like an anthropologist observing interesting but ultimately foreign customs. Who is that? Sebastian found himself asking. Marcus followed his gaze. No idea. Never seen her before. Why? She's the only woman in this room not looking at me. It was true. Every other female in attendance, from 16 to 60, had tracked Sebastian's movements with varying degrees of subtlety. But this woman in the rust-colored dress seemed entirely unaware of his existence. Her attention was fixed on the dancers, her face thoughtful rather than envious or eager. Perhaps she's blind, Marcus suggested, or monumentally stupid. Those are the only 2 reasons a woman wouldn't be cataloging your virtues for future reference. Or perhaps she's simply uninterested. Now you're being ridiculous. But Sebastian was already moving, drawn by curiosity as unfamiliar as it was compelling. He approached the woman with the confidence of someone accustomed to welcome, yet as he drew closer, uncertainty flickered through him, a sensation he hadn't experienced since adolescence. Up close, she was even less conventional than he'd thought. No jewels except simple pearl earrings, no elaborate coiffure, just dark brown hair pulled back in an unfussy knot. Her features were pleasant but unremarkable. A straight nose, a firm chin, hazel eyes that held intelligence, and something else. Wariness, perhaps. Or judgment. She was, by society's ruthless standards, plain, and Sebastian found her absolutely fascinating. "Good evening," he said, employing the smile that usually made women forget their own names. She turned to him with polite attention, like a shopkeeper greeting a customer. "Good evening." He waited for recognition to dawn, for her expression to shift into the familiar pattern: surprise, pleasure, calculation. It didn't come. She simply looked at him, waiting. "Sebastian Darrow," he offered, extending his hand. "Duke of Ravensbrück." "Clara Hamilton." Her handshake was firm and brief. "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Darrow." Mr. Darrow. The words hung between them like an unexpected jest. No one had called him Mr. Darrow since he'd inherited the title at 24. It should have been an insult. Instead, it felt oddly refreshing. "It's Your Grace, actually," he corrected gently. "Or Duke, if you prefer informality." "Oh." She didn't look particularly impressed. "I'm not very good with titles. My apologies, Mr. Your Grace." The correction sounded forced, as if she were humoring a child's pretend game. Sebastian felt a laugh building in his chest. An actual laugh, not the polite chuckle he deployed at tedious dinner parties. "Are you new to London, Miss Hamilton?" "Visiting. My aunt is Lady Judith Pemberton. She insisted I attend tonight, though I told her I'd be better suited to the library." Clara glanced back at the dancers. "I was right." "You don't enjoy balls." "I don't enjoy pretense." Her tone was matter-of-fact rather than bitter. "Everyone here is performing, dancing their prescribed steps, saying their prescribed lines, hoping to secure prescribed futures. It's like watching a very elaborate play where everyone knows their role except me." "And what role would you prefer?" "None. I prefer observation to participation." Sebastian studied her with growing interest. "That's a lonely preference." "Perhaps, but honesty often is." She met his eyes directly, without flirtation or deference. "May I ask you something frankly, Your Grace?" "Please." "Why are you talking to me? I'm not beautiful, I'm not wealthy, and I'm not trying to catch your attention. There are at least 24 women in this room who would faint with joy if you approached them. So why waste your time on someone who can't advance your social standing or stroke your ego?" The words should have been insulting. Instead, they were exhilarating. Sebastian felt like a man who'd been eating bland porridge for years and suddenly tasted spice. "Because you just said that," he replied. "Because you're the first honest person I've spoken to in months, possibly years." Honesty makes people uncomfortable. It makes them interesting. Claire's expression shifted slightly. Not toward warmth exactly, but toward something less guarded. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "An arrogant aristocrat counting his consequence. Someone who views people as either useful or beneath notice." "And instead?" "I'm not sure yet." She tilted her head, studying him with the same anthropological curiosity she'd directed at the dancers. "You seem bored." The accuracy of the observation startled him. "I am bored, desperately." "Then why stay? You're a duke. You can do whatever you want." "Can I?" Sebastian heard the bitterness creep into his voice. "I have estates to manage, tenants depending on me, a seat in Parliament, responsibilities that don't require you to endure balls you hate. Society expects you to marry a suitable woman and produce heirs." "I know. My aunt has explained it in exhausting detail." Clara's tone was dry. "But those expectations are chains you've accepted, not chains you're forced to wear. There's a difference." No one had ever spoken to him this way. Not Marcus, not his steward, certainly not any woman of his acquaintance. The ballroom suddenly felt too warm, too crowded. too full of watching eyes and whispering voices. "Would you like some air?" he asked impulsively. Clara hesitated. "People will talk." "Let them." "Easy for you to say. You're a duke. I'm a nobody visiting from Hampshire. The scandal won't touch you, but it will destroy me." She was right, of course. It was the unfair mathematics of their world. His reputation was fireproof while hers was tissue paper. The acknowledgement of that inequality without bitterness or pleading impressed him more than flattery ever could. "Then let's give them nothing to talk about." He offered his arm. "A turn around the room, completely proper, dozens of chaperones watching. Will that suffice?" After a moment, Clara placed her hand on his arm with visible reluctance. One turn. They walked, and Sebastian felt the weight of 300 gazes following their progress. Let them stare, let them wonder. For the first time in years, he didn't care. "You're causing a sensation," Clara murmured. "Every mother in this room is recalculating her strategy." "Because I'm walking with you?" "Because you're walking with someone they don't recognize as competition. They're trying to determine if I'm a threat or an anomaly." "Which are you?" "Neither. I'll be gone in 2 weeks." The finality in her voice bothered him more than it should. "Where will you go?" "Back to Hampshire. Back to my life." "Which consists of?" "Reading, walking, helping my father with his botanical research, managing our small household. It's quiet and unglamorous, and I prefer it to this." She gestured at the ballroom with her free hand. "No husband? No desire for one?" "I'm 26, Your Grace, well past the bloom of youth by society's standards. And I have no interest in marrying someone who sees me as a useful acquisition rather than a human being." Her voice remained level, but steel ran beneath it. "I'd rather be alone than be someone's afterthought." Sebastian felt something shift in his chest, a recognition, perhaps, or a kinship. He understood loneliness in crowds, the weight of being seen without being known. What if someone saw you as more than an acquisition? Clara stopped walking, forcing him to stop as well. Other couples flowed around them like water around stones. "Your Grace, I appreciate your attention, but I'm not interested in whatever game you're playing." "Game?" "This. The curiosity, the apparent fascination with the plain woman who doesn't fawn over you." Her hazel eyes were steady and unforgiving. "I've read enough novels to recognize the pattern. The jaded aristocrat finds novelty in someone different, pursues her for entertainment, then moves on when the novelty fades. I won't be your distraction." The accuracy of her assessment cut deeper than criticism had any right to. Was that what he was doing? Using her to alleviate his boredom? "You're wrong," he said, though he wasn't entirely certain he believed it. "Am I? Then tell me honestly, if I were beautiful and wealthy, would you have approached me with the same intrigue? Or is my ordinariness precisely what makes me interesting to you?" Sebastian opened his mouth to deny it, then closed it again. The truth was more complicated than simple yes or no. Her lack of artifice drew him, yes, but was that because it was genuine, or because it was different from what he usually encountered? Clara read his hesitation correctly. "That's what I thought." She removed her hand from his arm. "Thank you for the walk, Your Grace. I'm sure you have more important people to charm." She turned to leave, and Sebastian did something he'd never done before. He panicked. "Wait." The word came out more desperate than commanding. Clara paused, but didn't turn around. "You're right," Sebastian said to her back. "About all of it. I am bored. I am looking for distraction. And yes, your difference from every other woman here is part of what drew my attention." He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "But you're wrong about one thing." Now she turned, her expression guarded. "Which is?" "You're not ordinary, you're extraordinary, and I'm not interested in you because you're different from them." He gestured at the ballroom. "I'm interested because you're more yourself than anyone I've ever met. That's rare. That's valuable. And that has nothing to do with beauty or wealth or novelty." For a long moment, Clara simply looked at him. The musicians started a new waltz. Somewhere a woman laughed too loudly at something that probably wasn't funny. The chandeliers dripped light onto the oblivious crowd. "I don't believe you," Clara said finally, "but I appreciate the effort." She walked away, leaving Sebastian standing alone in the middle of the ballroom floor, feeling both dismissed and more alive than he'd felt in years. Marcus appeared at his shoulder moments later. That went well. Shut up, Marcus. Was that sarcasm? From you? My goodness, she's already having an effect. Sebastian watched Clara rejoin an older woman near the refreshment table, Lady Judith Pemberton, presumably. Even from a distance, he could see the aunt's excitement, the rapid questions, Clara's calm responses. I'm going to marry her, Sebastian heard himself say. Marcus choked on his champagne. I beg your pardon? You heard me. Sebastian, you spoke to her for 10 minutes. She insulted you. She walked away from you. She clearly wants nothing to do with you. Exactly. Sebastian felt a smile pulling at his mouth. A real smile. The kind that actually reached his eyes. She's perfect. She's insane. Or you are. I haven't decided which. But Sebastian wasn't listening. He was watching Clara, who was watching the dancers again with that same detached curiosity, as if the entire conversation with him had never happened, as if he were already forgotten. The challenge of it sang in his blood. The next morning, Sebastian dispatched servants to learn everything about Clara Hamilton. By afternoon, he had his intelligence. Daughter of a deceased botanist of modest means, raised in Hampshire, educated at home, no prospects, no fortune, no connections beyond her aunt. She was, by every measure that mattered to his class, nobody. And she'd looked at him like he was equally nobody, which somehow made her the most fascinating person in England. The flowers he sent to Lady Pemberton's townhouse were returned with a polite note. Miss Hamilton does not accept gifts from gentlemen. The invitation to a prestigious musicale was declined. Miss Hamilton has no interest in attending. When he called at the house in person, he was informed that Miss Hamilton was not receiving visitors. She's refusing to see me, Sebastian told Marcus over brandy that evening, still incredulous. I gathered that from the pattern of rejections. Most women would sell their souls for a quarter of the attention you're giving her. She's not most women. Clearly. Marcus swirled his brandy thoughtfully. Have you considered that perhaps she simply doesn't like you? Of course I've considered it. It's the only explanation that makes sense. Sebastian stared into his glass. And it's driving me mad. Why? Why does this particular woman matter so much? London is full of beautiful, accomplished women who would marry you tomorrow. Because she's the first person in a decade who's treated me like a man instead of a title. Because she looked at all my wealth and power and remained completely unmoved. Because... He trailed off, searching for words. Because when I'm with her, I'm not the Duke of Ravensbrück. I'm just Sebastian, and I'd forgotten what that felt like. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. You're serious about this? Completely. Then you have a problem. Because everything that makes you desirable to other women, your title, your wealth, your influence, is precisely what makes her distrust you. I know. So what will you do? Sebastian set down his glass with careful precision. I'll prove to her that I'm more than what she thinks I am. And how exactly do you plan to do that? I have no idea, but I'll figure it out. He had to. Because for the first time since inheriting a title he'd never wanted, Sebastian had found something, someone, worth fighting for. And dukes, for all their privilege and power, rarely fought for anything. They simply acquired. But Clara Hamilton could not be acquired. She could only be earned. And Sebastian Darrow, the 7th Duke of Ravensbrück, would learn what it meant to earn something for the first time in his life, even if it cost him everything he'd spent his life building, even if it meant becoming someone entirely new. The game had begun, and Sebastian had already lost the first round, but the match was far from over. The whispers started 3 days after the Pemberton ball, spreading through London's drawing rooms like fever through a sick room. The Duke of Ravensbrück, powerful, untouchable Sebastian Darrow, had been rejected. Not once, but repeatedly. By a nobody from Hampshire with no fortune, no connections, and no sense. Lady Thornbury announced it over tea at the Duchess of Marlborough's residence, her voice dripping with scandalized delight. Returned his flowers. Can you imagine? The man could buy half of Hampshire, and this Clara Hamilton treats him like a persistent tradesman. Perhaps she's simple-minded, suggested Miss Caroline Whitmore, whose own pursuit of the Duke had ended in polite but firm dismissal the previous season. Or playing a very calculated game. Oh, it's calculation, mark my words. Mrs. Arabella Winters, mother of the accomplished pianist Sebastian had snubbed, leaned forward conspiratorially. She's making herself scarce to drive up her value. It's the oldest trick in the courtesan's handbook. The assessment was vicious and entirely wrong, but truth had never been society's primary currency. Within a week, Clara Hamilton's name was being spoken in every fashionable home in London, each telling more elaborate than the last. She was a schemer, a fortune hunter of unusual cunning, a woman so plain she had to resort to reverse psychology to catch a duke. Lady Judith Pemberton heard the gossip and tried to shield her niece, but Clara had already noticed the changed atmosphere. Women who'd ignored her at the ball now watched her with naked hostility. Men looked at her with speculation that made her skin crawl. And everywhere, always, there were whispers. "They think I'm trying to trap him," Clara said flatly, staring out the window of her aunt's morning room at the gray London sky. A week had passed since the ball, and the city felt increasingly like a prison. "They think I'm some kind of schemer." "Of course they do, darling." Judith set down her embroidery with a sigh. "You've committed the unforgivable sin of being noticed by a duke while failing to be either beautiful or wealthy. Society can't comprehend it, so they've invented a narrative that makes sense to them. I didn't ask for his notice." "I know, but you have it nonetheless, and now you must decide what to do about it." Clara turned from the window, frustration sharpening her voice. "There's nothing to do. I told him I wasn't interested. I've refused his gifts, declined his invitations, avoided his calls. What more can I do short of leaving London entirely?" "Would that be so terrible?" The question hung in the air between them. Clara had been in London for 2 weeks, with 2 weeks remaining of her promised visit. The prospect of escape suddenly seemed less like retreat and more like salvation. "You'd be disappointed," Clara said quietly. "I'd be relieved." Judith's expression was gentle. "You hate it here, Clara. You've hated every moment since you arrived. The only reason you're staying is because you promised me a month and you're too honorable to break your word. You wanted me to experience society, to have opportunities I'd never have in Hampshire. I wanted you to be happy, and you're miserable." Judith stood, crossing to take her niece's hands. "Go home, darling. There's no shame in it." But there was shame, the shame of being chased away by gossip, of letting small-minded people drive her from a place she had every right to be. Clara had spent her life being practical, accepting her limitations, staying within the narrow boundaries society drew for women like her. And she was tired of it. "No," she heard herself say. "I'll stay. I'll finish my visit as promised." "Clara, they want me to run, to confirm their suspicions that I'm some scheming opportunist who got caught and retreated. I won't give them the satisfaction." Judith's eyes gleamed with something that might have been pride. "You're your mother's daughter. She was just as stubborn." Was she happy? Being stubborn? Not always, but she was herself, which mattered more to her than happiness. Judith squeezed Clara's hands. "Just promise me you'll be careful. Society is a dangerous place for women who refuse to play by the rules." Clara promised, though she had no idea yet how dangerous it would become. Sebastian spent the week after the ball in a state of focused determination that his household staff found both impressive and alarming. He'd always been an attentive employer, but now he threw himself into a state business with almost manic energy, as if proving to himself or to someone unseen that he was more than a decorative figurehead. He reviewed tenant complaints he'd previously delegated to his steward. He examined the books personally, finding inefficiencies his accountants had overlooked. He visited his properties outside London, speaking directly with farmers and workers who'd never expected to see the Duke himself inspecting their cottages. "You're making everyone nervous," Marcus observed, watching Sebastian pore over agricultural reports in his study. "Your housekeeper thinks you're dying. Your steward thinks you've gone mad. And I'm beginning to wonder if you're trying to prove something to a woman who isn't even watching." "I'm proving it to myself." Sebastian made a notation in the margin of a report. "Do you know what I realized? I've been Duke of Ravensbrück for 8 years, and I couldn't tell you the names of half my tenants. I couldn't tell you which fields are producing and which are failing. I've been signing documents and attending Parliament and playing the role without actually doing the work." You've been doing exactly what every other duke does. Exactly. And Clara was right. I've accepted chains I didn't have to wear. I've let the title define me instead of defining it myself. He set down his pen, meeting Marcus's eyes. I want to be worthy of her, not as a duke, but as a man. And right now, I'm not. Marcus absorbed this in silence. You're really going to do this, aren't you? Transform yourself for a woman who's made it abundantly clear she wants nothing to do with you. Not for her, for me. She just showed me what I'd stopped seeing. And when you've completed this transformation, when you're the perfect, worthy version of yourself, what then? Then I'll ask her again. And maybe, the answer will be different. And if it's not? Sebastian didn't answer. He couldn't bear to consider that possibility yet. The confrontation came on a Thursday afternoon at Lady Ashworth's garden party, an event Clara had tried desperately to avoid. But her aunt had insisted. Hiding would only confirm the gossip, and so Clara found herself in a manicured garden surrounded by people who looked at her like she was an exotic and possibly dangerous animal. She was standing near the rose arbor, trying to appear interested in the blooms while actually plotting her escape, when Arabella Winters approached with two other young women in her wake, like ladies in waiting. Miss Hamilton, Arabella's smile was sugar-coating poison. How delightful to see you again. Clara recognized a predator circling prey. Miss Winters. We were just discussing the Duke of Ravensbrook. You know him, don't you? We've met. Oh, it's more than that, surely. Arabella's eyes glittered. Everyone knows he's been pursuing you quite desperately. Flowers, invitations, personal calls. It must be so flattering. It's been unwanted. Has it? One of the other women, Miss Sarah Fletcher, stepped closer. Because my mother heard from Lady Thornbury that you've been asking your aunt about the Duke's fortune, about his properties and holdings. The lie was so blatant, so easily disproven that Clara almost laughed. Almost. But she saw the calculation behind it. These women didn't care about truth. They cared about destroying a perceived threat. Your mother heard wrong, Clara said evenly. Did she? Or are you simply more clever than we gave you credit for? Arabella's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper that somehow carried to the nearby guests. I admire it, truly. Playing disinterested while actually researching his worth. Making yourself difficult to increase your value. It's quite brilliant. That's not... Oh, don't be modest. You saw an opportunity and you seized it. A duke with too much money and too little sense, bored enough to be intrigued by novelty. And you, plain, poor, with no prospects. You must have thought you'd won a lottery when he noticed you. The words landed like physical blows. Around them, other guests had stopped pretending not to listen. They formed a loose circle, watching with the avid interest people brought to cockfights and public executions. Clara felt her face heating, her hands trembling with fury and humiliation. Part of her wanted to flee, to confirm their assumptions by running. But a stronger part, the part that was her mother's daughter, refused to give them the satisfaction. You're wrong about everything, Clara said quietly, but her voice carried in the sudden hush. I didn't seek the Duke's attention. I don't want his fortune, and I'm not playing any game except trying to survive in a world that treats women like commodities to be traded. How noble! Arabella's laugh was crystal and cruel, and yet here you are, at every event he might attend, wearing your shabby dresses like armor, performing this elaborate pantomime of disinterest. If you truly wanted nothing to do with him, you'd leave London. But you won't, will you? Because then the game would be over. I'm staying because I promised my aunt a month, and I keep my promises. Or because you're hoping the Duke will propose before your time runs out. That's enough. The new voice cut through the tension like a blade through silk. Sebastian stood at the edge of the circle, and Clara had no idea how long he'd been there or how much he'd heard. His face was carefully blank, but his eyes blazed with something that made Arabella step back involuntarily. Your Grace! Arabella dropped into a curtsy, her face flushing. We were just... I heard what you were doing, Miss Winters, and I suggest you find somewhere else to be. All of you. Now. The dismissal was absolute. The women scattered like startled birds, their departure watched by dozens of fascinated eyes. The garden party's civilized murmur had died entirely. Every guest stood frozen, waiting to see what would happen next. Sebastian turned to Clara, and she saw something in his expression that made her chest tight. Not pity, exactly, but understanding. Recognition of shared humiliation. "Miss Hamilton," he said formally, "might I speak with you privately?" "I don't think that's wise, Your Grace. It will only fuel more speculation." "Let them speculate." He offered his arm. "Please." Clara hesitated, acutely aware of every watching eye, every held breath. Accepting would confirm the gossip, refusing would humiliate them both publicly. There was no good choice. She placed her hand on his arm. They walked in silence toward the far end of the garden, where a small pavilion offered the illusion of privacy. Clara could feel the weight of stares following them, could imagine the whispers already starting. She'd made everything worse by agreeing to this. "I'm sorry," Sebastian said as soon as they were out of immediate earshot. "For what? You didn't start those rumors." "No, but I caused them by being too public in my attention. I made you a target." Clara laughed without humor. "I was already a target the moment you spoke to me at that ball. Women like Arabella Winters see women like me as threats because we don't play by their rules. They'd have found a reason to attack regardless. Still, I should have been more careful. Or you should have left me alone like I asked." The words came out sharper than intended. Sebastian flinched but didn't retreat. Would that have helped, or would they simply have found a different reason to judge you? He had a point. Society's cruelty didn't require rational cause. It simply needed acceptable targets. And unmarried women without beauty, fortune, or powerful connections were always acceptable targets. "Why are you doing this?" Clara asked, genuine confusion replacing her anger. "Why pursue someone who's clearly brought you nothing but complications? You could have any woman in London. Beautiful women. Accomplished women. Women who actually want your attention." "Because they don't see me, Clara. They see the Duke. They see the fortune and the title and the opportunity. But you looked at all of that and remained completely unmoved. Do you know how rare that is? How intoxicating? So I'm still just a novelty, a puzzle to solve." "No." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to something raw and honest. "At first, maybe. I'll admit that. But this past week, I've done nothing but think about what you said at the ball. About accepting chains I didn't have to wear, about being more than just a title. And you were right about all of it. I've spent 8 years being the Duke of Ravensbrück without ever asking what that should mean beyond signing documents and attending social functions. I've been lazy, complacent, playing a role instead of living a life." Clara studied his face, searching for manipulation and finding only earnestness. It would be easier if she could dismiss him as a bored aristocrat playing games. But there was something in his eyes, a vulnerability she recognized because she'd felt it herself. "What do you want from me, Your Grace?" "Sebastian. Please, just call me Sebastian." "That wouldn't be appropriate." "Nothing about this situation is appropriate. We're already the subject of scandal. We might as well use first names." Despite everything, Clara felt a smile tugging at her mouth. "You're not very good at following society's rules, are you?" "I'm discovering I don't want to be. Not if the rules mean I can't be honest with someone I find fascinating." There's that word again, fascinating. Like I'm an exotic specimen you want to study. "That's not—" Sebastian stopped, frustration crossing his face. "I'm doing this badly. Quite badly. Help me then. Tell me what you want to hear." "That's the problem, Your Grace. Sebastian?" His name felt strange on her tongue, too intimate, too real. "I don't want to hear anything. I don't want to be convinced or courted or won. I want to go back to Hampshire and my quiet life and forget any of this happened." "But you're not leaving." "No." "Why not?" Because she was tired of running. Because she'd spent her whole life accepting limitations and lowering expectations, and she was done. Because somewhere in the past week, amid the gossip and hostility, she'd discovered a stubbornness she'd inherited from her mother, a refusal to be chased from a place she had every right to be. "Because I'm tired of letting other people decide what I deserve," Clara said finally. Sebastian's expression shifted into something that looked like recognition, perhaps even admiration. "Then we're the same, you and I, both trying to figure out who we are beyond what others expect. We're not the same at all. You have power, privilege, choices. I have none of those things. You have something I don't. You have yourself, completely, honestly yourself. And I'd trade everything I have for that kind of certainty. The words hung between them in the garden's manicured quiet. Somewhere, a string quartet had started playing. Voices drifted from the lawn where the party continued without them. And Clara felt something dangerous stirring in her chest. Not love, not yet, but the possibility of it. The terrifying recognition that maybe, just maybe, this man saw her as something more than society's assessment. "I don't trust you," she said, testing him. "I know. I don't trust your motives or your interest or any of this." "I know that too. Then why continue?" "Because I trust you. I trust your honesty, your judgment, your refusal to compromise yourself for acceptance. And I want to earn the same trust from you, even if it takes months, years, however long it requires." Clara wanted to believe him. She wanted it with a fierceness that frightened her, which was precisely why she couldn't afford to. Men like Sebastian Darrow didn't marry women like Clara Hamilton. They might be intrigued temporarily, might even be sincere in the moment, but reality always reasserted itself. And when it did, Clara would be left with nothing but humiliation and regret. "I think you should leave me alone, Your Grace." Pain flashed across his features. "Is that truly what you want?" "It's what I need." "Those aren't the same thing." "No, but they're all I have." She walked away before he could respond, aware of every eye tracking her progress across the lawn. By tomorrow, the gossip would have evolved. The Duke publicly humiliated by a fortune hunter who'd overplayed her hand. Or perhaps they'd spin it differently, painting her as a woman who'd rejected England's most eligible bachelor and proven herself either mad or impossibly arrogant. It didn't matter. None of it mattered. Clara found her aunt near the refreshment tables, made their excuses, and left the party with her head high and her hands trembling. She'd survived. That was enough. But surviving wasn't the same as winning, and that night, lying awake in her borrowed bedroom, Clara faced the truth she'd been avoiding. She couldn't keep doing this, couldn't keep existing in London's hostile atmosphere, fending off gossip and unwanted attention while pretending everything was fine. Something had to change. The decision crystallized in the pre-dawn darkness, sharp and certain and possibly insane. But Clara was done being careful, done protecting herself by staying small and invisible. If society was going to judge her anyway, she might as well give them something worth judging. By morning, she had a plan. It was bold, possibly reckless, and would either prove her point spectacularly or destroy what little reputation she had left. But for the first time since arriving in London, Clara Hamilton felt like herself again, and that terrified her more than anything society could do. The plan took shape over breakfast 3 days later, and it was audacious enough that even Judith blanched when Clara explained it. "Absolutely not," her aunt said, setting down her teacup with enough force to rattle the saucer. "Clara, I understand you're frustrated, but this is madness." "It's necessary." Clara kept her voice steady, despite the nervous energy thrumming through her veins. "They've already decided I'm a schemer trying to trap the Duke. I can't change their minds by being quiet and proper, so I'll do the opposite. I'll be so publicly, spectacularly uninterested in marriage and fortune that they'll have to acknowledge the truth. By attending the charity auction, alone, without a chaperone? You'll be there, just not hovering. I need to demonstrate independence, Aunt Judith. I need to show them I'm not some helpless fortune hunter waiting for a man to rescue me." "And how exactly does attending an auction accomplish that?" Clara leaned forward, passion sharpening her words. "The auction is raising funds for the London Foundling Hospital. I'm going to bid publicly, using my own money, the small inheritance my mother left me. I'll purchase something meaningful and donate it back to the hospital. I'll show them that I care about something beyond catching a wealthy husband." Judith studied her niece with a mixture of concern and reluctant admiration. "And you think this will silence the gossip?" "No, but it will give them something else to talk about. Right now, I'm just a mysterious nobody. This will make me a nobody with principles, with agency, with a purpose beyond marriage. You'll also be declaring yourself unmarriageable. No respectable man will want a wife who demonstrates such independence." "Good. I don't want a man who's threatened by a woman with opinions and resources of her own." The words hung in the morning air, bold and irreversible. Judith sighed deeply, recognizing the futility of argument. Clara had inherited her mother's stubbornness, along with her plain features and quick mind. When she made a decision, opposition only strengthened her resolve. "Your mother would have done exactly this," Judith said finally, "and it terrified your father half to death. But he loved her anyway." "He did, right up until the moment she died, bringing you into the world, and then he loved her even more fiercely through his grief." Judith's eyes glistened. "Just promise me you'll be careful. Society forgives men their eccentricities. Women, they destroy." Clara promised, though both of them knew the promise was hollow. Careful wasn't compatible with what she was planning. The Hartwell charity auction was held at Ashford Manor, Marcus Thornfield's sprawling estate on the outskirts of London. It was the social event of the spring season, attracting the wealthiest and most influential members of the ton. The auction itself was secondary to the networking, the posturing, the careful cultivation of connections that greased the wheels of power and commerce. Clara arrived in her simplest dress, dark green with minimal ornamentation, and immediately felt the weight of attention settle on her shoulders like a physical thing. Conversation stuttered and restarted. Eyes tracked her progress through the crowded reception hall. The whispers followed her like wasps. "That's her. The Hamilton woman. Bold as brass, showing her face after the garden party incident. I heard the Duke hasn't spoken to her since. She must be desperate." Clara kept her spine straight and her expression neutral, though her heart hammered against her ribs. She'd prepared for this. The stares, the judgment, the hostility. But preparation didn't make it easier. The auction items were displayed in the manor's grand ballroom, each accompanied by a placard describing the piece and its significance. Paintings by fashionable artists. A diamond necklace donated by a duchess. A first-edition Shakespeare folio. A thoroughbred mare. And then, in the corner, something that made Clara's breath catch. A piece of land. 300 acres in Hampshire, adjacent to her father's modest property. The land her father had dreamed of buying before illness and debt had consumed his final years. The land that would have completed his botanical research, given him space to cultivate the rare specimens he'd collected from around the world. The land she'd thought was lost forever. Clara read the placard with trembling hands. The property had been seized for unpaid debts by a London banking house, which was now donating it to the auction for the tax benefit. Starting bid, £500. Estimated value, $800. She had exactly £600 from her mother's inheritance, money she'd been saving for emergencies, for the uncertain future that stretched before her. Spending it on land would leave her virtually penniless. Practical, sensible, safe. But her father's research, his life's work, was incomplete without this land, and Clara was so tired of being practical. "Interesting choice," the voice came from directly behind her. Clara turned to find Sebastian watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. He was impeccably dressed as always, but there was something different about him, a tension in his jaw, a guardedness in his eyes. "Your Grace." She kept her voice formal, aware of the dozens of people pretending not to watch their interaction. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Why not? It's a charity auction. Even poor spinsters from Hampshire can care about foundlings." The barb landed. Sebastian flinched. "That's not what I meant." "Wasn't it?" They stood in silence, the unresolved tension from the garden party stretching between them like a wire pulled taut. Clara wanted to walk away, to maintain the distance she'd established, but something in Sebastian's expression held her in place. A vulnerability she recognized because she'd been feeling it herself. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "For all of it. For making you a target. For pursuing you despite your clear disinterest. For being so blinded by my own, whatever this is, that I didn't consider the cost to you." Clara had prepared for many things, but not for a genuine apology. "You're apologizing?" "I should have done it sooner, days ago. But I was—" He stopped, searching for words. "I was too proud, too convinced that persistence was romantic rather than harassment. Marcus finally made me see sense." "Lord Ashford advised you to apologize?" "Lord Ashford told me I was being a selfish bastard who cared more about winning than about your well-being. He was right." Despite everything, Clara felt something soften in her chest. That must have been a difficult conversation. Excruciating. He's insufferably smug when he's correct. Sebastian's mouth quirked in something almost like a smile. But he was correct. I've been thinking about what I want without considering what you need. And what you need is for me to leave you alone. Yes. So I will. After tonight, I'll stop attending events where you might be present. I'll stop sending flowers and invitations. I'll stop making your life more difficult than it already is. He paused, his gray eyes holding hers with uncomfortable intensity. But I want you to know something first. What? This past week, I've been visiting my estates, talking to tenants, learning about the actual work of managing properties, instead of just signing documents my steward puts in front of me. And do you know what I discovered? Clara shook her head, not trusting her voice. I discovered that I've been failing, not catastrophically. I inherited good people who've been doing the real work while I played at being Duke. But I've been absent, disconnected. Exactly the kind of ornamental aristocrat you accused me of being. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You were right, Clara. About everything. And meeting you, being rejected by you, forced me to see it. So thank you. For the honesty. For refusing to let me hide behind charm and title. For making me want to be better. The words landed like stones in still water, sending ripples through Clara's carefully constructed defenses. This wasn't the practiced seduction of a bored aristocrat. This was something raw and real and terrifying in its sincerity. I don't know what to say, Clara admitted. You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know that you mattered, that you changed something in me, even if I never see you again after tonight. Sebastian stepped back, creating distance. I hope you find what you're looking for, Miss Hamilton. Whatever that is. He walked away before Clara could respond, leaving her standing alone among the auction items, with her heart doing complicated things in her chest. She'd wanted him to leave her alone, had demanded it repeatedly. So why did his departure feel like loss? The auction began an hour later with Marcus Thornfield serving as master of ceremonies. He was charming and irreverent, coaxing ever higher bids from the competitive crowd with a combination of flattery and gentle mockery that had the ballroom laughing despite itself. Clara stood near the back, her 600 pounds converted to auction tokens clutched in her hand. She'd wait for the Hampshire land, make her bid, and then leave. Simple, clean. A statement of independence that would give the gossips something to discuss besides her relationship with the Duke, but nothing was simple where Sebastian Darrow was involved. The land came up for auction earlier than Clara expected. Marcus described it with practiced enthusiasm. Prime agricultural territory, well-watered, excellent soil, adjacent to existing farms. He didn't mention that those existing farms included her father's property. He didn't need to. We'll start the bidding at 500 pounds, Marcus announced. Who'll give me 500 for 300 acres of Hampshire's finest? Clara raised her paddle immediately, before nerves could stop her. 500 to the lady in green, Marcus called. Do I hear 550? For a moment, Clara thought she might actually win it. Then a paddle went up across the room. 550. Thank you, sir. Do I hear 600? Clara raised her paddle again, her heart pounding. 600 was everything she had. If someone bid higher, she was finished. 600 to the persistent lady in green. Marcus's eyes found hers across the crowd, and something like concern flickered across his face. Do I hear 650? The same paddle rose. A London banker, Clara saw, one of the men who'd seized the property in the first place. He was bidding it up for sport, for the entertainment of watching someone struggle. 650. Do I hear 700? Clara lowered her paddle. She had nothing left. The land would go to the banker, who'd probably turn around and sell it for a profit. Her father's dream would remain unfinished, and she'd return to Hampshire with nothing to show for her London adventure except humiliation and debt. Going once at 650, Marcus called, though his voice had lost its playful edge. Then Sebastian's voice cut through the ballroom like a blade. 5,000 pounds. The silence was absolute. 300 heads turned in unison to stare at the Duke of Ravensbrook, who stood near the entrance with his paddle raised and his expression carved from granite. I'm sorry, Marcus said carefully. Did you say 5,000? I did. 5,000 pounds for the Hampshire property. The banker's face went purple with rage at being so thoroughly outbid, but he lowered his paddle. No one in the room could match 5,000 pounds for land worth perhaps a tenth of that, going once. Marcus said slowly, looking between Sebastian and Clara with an expression of dawning understanding. Going twice. Sold to the Duke of Ravensbrück for £5,000. The applause was scattered and confused. People didn't understand what had just happened or why the Duke had vastly overpaid for essentially worthless land. But Clara understood. She understood perfectly. And she was furious. She pushed through the crowd toward Sebastian, not caring how it looked, not caring about the scandal she was creating. He'd just purchased the one thing that mattered to her, the one thing she'd been trying to secure with her own money and her own agency. He'd taken even that from her. "You had no right," she hissed when she reached him, keeping her voice low but not bothering to hide her anger. "That land was mine. I was bidding on it. You knew that, and I did what needed to be done. No, you did what you wanted to do. You saw something I cared about and you took it, just to prove you could." Sebastian's jaw tightened. "That's not—" "What were you planning? To present it to me as a gift? To hold it over my head until I agreed to see you again? To use it as leverage?" Clara was shaking now, fury and humiliation and something deeper coursing through her. "You told me an hour ago you'd leave me alone. You apologized, and then you did this." "Clara, if you'd just let me explain—" "There's nothing to explain. You're exactly what I thought you were. A man so accustomed to getting what he wants that you can't conceive of someone saying no. Well, I'm saying no. To you, to your money, to whatever game you're playing." She turned to leave, but Sebastian's hand closed around her wrist, gentle but firm, stopping her. "It's for the hospital," he said. Clara froze. "What?" "The land. I'm donating it to the Foundling Hospital. That's what this auction is for, isn't it? Raising money for charity?" His gray eyes held hers, pleading for understanding. "I'm giving them the land. They can sell it, use the proceeds to help children. I don't want it." "Then why bid?" "Because that banker was going to buy it for a fraction of its value and flip it for profit. Because watching you lose something you clearly wanted was unbearable. Because—" He stopped, frustrated. "Because I'm trying to do the right thing and apparently failing spectacularly at it." Clara's anger wavered, replaced by confusion. "You're donating £5,000 worth of land to charity." "Yes." "Land you don't want or need." "Correct." "Because you didn't want me to lose it, but you also knew I couldn't accept it from you." "I'm beginning to understand how you think, Miss Hamilton. And you would have set that land on fire before accepting it as a gift from me." He wasn't wrong. Clara would have refused anything that put her in Sebastian's debt, that gave him power over her. But this, donating it to charity, removed both the debt and the power. It was generous and selfless and completely unexpected. It was also causing a massive scandal. The ballroom had gone silent, every guest watching their confrontation with undisguised fascination. Clara could see the calculations happening behind dozens of eyes, the Duke and the fortune hunter arguing publicly over land he'd just purchased for an astronomical sum. By tomorrow, the gossip would be nuclear. The story would evolve into something unrecognizable, something vicious. "We need to talk," Clara said quietly. "But not here," Sebastian nodded. "The garden? Too public, everyone will follow." She glanced around, spotted a servant's entrance partially hidden by a decorative screen. "There, 5 minutes." She walked away before he could respond, before anyone could intercept them. Her mind raced with implications and consequences. She'd come to the auction to demonstrate independence, to show society she was more than their gossip. Instead, she'd created the biggest scandal of the season. But maybe that was exactly what needed to happen. Maybe the only way to survive London's vicious social battlefield was to burn it down entirely. The servants' corridor was narrow and dimly lit, smelling of lamp oil and floor wax. Clara waited in the shadows, her back against the wall, trying to organize her chaotic thoughts into something coherent. Sebastian appeared within minutes, closing the door carefully behind him. In the confined space, he seemed larger, more present. Clara was acutely aware of his proximity, of the way his breathing matched hers in the quiet. "That was either very noble or very stupid," Clara said without preamble. "I haven't decided which." "Probably both." Sebastian leaned against the opposite wall, maintaining careful distance. I seem to specialize in noble stupidity where you're concerned. £5,000, Sebastian, for land worth maybe 800. It's going to charity, and it's my money to waste. It's not about the money, it's about... Clara struggled to articulate the tangled frustration. You keep doing this. You keep inserting yourself into my life, making grand gestures, trying to fix problems I never asked you to fix. And every time you do, it makes everything worse. I know. Do you? Do you understand that by tomorrow, every gossip in London will be saying I manipulated you into this? That I'm some kind of scheming seductress who's got the Duke so besotted he's throwing away fortunes? They'll say I orchestrated the whole thing, coming to the auction, bidding on that specific land, knowing you'd rescue me. They'll say that regardless of what actually happened. Society doesn't care about truth. But this gives them ammunition. This makes their lies seem plausible. Sebastian pushed away from the wall, his frustration finally showing. Then what should I have done? Let that banker buy your father's land for nothing? Watch you lose the one thing you actually wanted from this godforsaken city? I couldn't... He stopped, jaw working. I couldn't just stand there and do nothing. Why not? Why do you care what I lose or keep? Because the words caught in his throat. Because watching you hurts me. And I know that's irrational and inappropriate, and you've given me no reason to feel entitled to care, but I can't seem to stop. The confession hung between them in the narrow corridor, raw and honest and terrifying. Clara felt her carefully constructed defenses cracking, felt something dangerous stirring beneath her anger and fear. You can't save me, she said quietly. I don't need saving. I just need to be left alone to fight my own battles. I'm not trying to save you. I'm trying to... Sebastian ran a hand through his hair, destroying its careful styling. I don't know what I'm trying to do. Every instinct I have says to help, to use my resources to make your life easier. But you're right. Every time I try, I make things worse. So tell me, please, tell me what you actually need from me. I need you to understand that I can't be with you. The words came out more gently than Clara intended, but they needed to be said. This thing between them, whatever it was, couldn't continue. Not in a world where every interaction was weaponized, where every gesture was scrutinized and twisted into scandal. Because of society, Sebastian said flatly. Because of reality. You're a duke. I'm nobody. Even if there was something between us, it couldn't work. Your family would never accept me. Your peers would mock you. And I'd spend the rest of my life being the unsuitable wife, the woman who trapped the Duke, the constant reminder of your poor judgment. I don't care what they think. You say that now, but you will. Eventually, the weight of their disapproval will become unbearable, and you'll resent me for it, for making your life difficult, for not being what you needed. Clara's voice cracked despite her efforts to keep it steady. I've watched it happen. My mother, she married beneath her station. My father adored her, but that didn't stop him from seeing the disappointment in her family's eyes at every gathering. Didn't stop her from dying too young, worn down by trying to bridge two incompatible worlds. I'm not your father. No, you're a duke, which makes the gulf between us even wider. Sebastian stared at her, and Clara saw the moment he truly understood what she was saying, not just the words, but the finality beneath them. He could argue, he could make promises, but the fundamental truth remained unchanged. So that's it, he said. We just walk away from each other. There's no we. There's you, and there's me, and there's an unbridgeable gap between us. What if I don't want to bridge it? What if I want to eliminate it entirely? Before Clara could ask what he meant, the corridor door burst open. Marcus Thornfield stood in the doorway, his face grim. You need to come back to the ballroom, he said without preamble. Now. Marcus, we're in the middle of... Arabella Winters just announced to the entire assembly that she saw Miss Hamilton entering the Duke's private study at the Pemberton Ball, unchaperoned, for over an hour. Marcus's eyes moved to Clara, sympathy and warning mixing in his expression. She's claiming you've been conducting a secret affair, and people are believing her. The words hit like a physical blow. Clara felt the corridor walls closing in, felt the weight of inevitable scandal crushing her chest. Of course, Of course, Arabella would do this, create a lie so vicious it couldn't be easily disproven, timing it for maximum damage. "It's not true," Clara said numbly. We never. "I know, but that won't matter." Marcus looked between them, decision hardening his features. Right now, half of London's elite is in that ballroom, and they're all hearing Arabella's accusation. If you don't respond immediately, the silence will be taken as confirmation. Sebastian's hand found Clara's, his grip warm and solid and the only stable thing in a suddenly tilting world. "Then we respond. Together." "Sebastian, no. They've already decided we're conducting an affair. They've already destroyed your reputation and questioned my judgment. We have nothing left to lose." His gray eyes blazed with something fierce and reckless. "So let's give them something to actually talk about." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying marry me." The words echoed in the narrow corridor like a gunshot. Clara's brain stuttered, trying to process impossible syllables arranged in an impossible order. "You've lost your mind," she whispered. "Probably. But it's the only solution that makes sense. If we're engaged, Arabella's accusation becomes moot. We were courting privately, planning our future, nothing inappropriate. Society will grumble, but accept it. Your reputation is restored, and I become exactly what they already think I am. A fortune hunter who trapped a duke. Or you become a woman who made a strategic choice to survive in a hostile world. There's no shame in that." Clara pulled her hand free, stepping back until she hit the corridor wall. This was madness. Complete, absolute insanity. Marry Sebastian Darrow? Become the Duchess of Ravensbrück? Live the rest of her life under society's microscope, forever the unsuitable wife who didn't belong? "I can't," she said. "You can. You just don't want to." "Because it's wrong. Because marriage should be about more than damage control and strategic advantage. Because—" her voice broke. "Because I won't be someone you settle for out of obligation." Sebastian crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands framing her face with unexpected gentleness. "You think this is obligation? Clara, I've spent the past 2 weeks thinking about nothing but you, changing myself because of you, becoming someone worthy of you. This isn't obligation. This is the first completely selfish thing I've done in 8 years. You're caught up in the challenge. Once you actually have me, you'll realize I'm not worth this. Let me be the judge of my own heart." "Your heart isn't the problem, it's mine." Clara felt tears threatening and forced them back through sheer will. "I don't love you, Sebastian. I barely know you, and I won't marry someone I don't love, no matter how strategic it might be." The words were brutal and necessary and absolutely true, and they landed on Sebastian like physical blows, draining the fierce certainty from his expression. "But you could," he said quietly. "Could love me. If you gave yourself permission. I've seen it. The way you look at me when you think I'm not watching. The way you softened when I apologized. You feel something, Clara. You're just too afraid to admit it." He wasn't wrong. Clara did feel something, a dangerous, terrifying pull toward this impossible man who kept surprising her with his honesty and vulnerability. But feeling something wasn't the same as love. And even if it was, love alone couldn't overcome the fundamental incompatibility of their worlds. "I'm going back to Hampshire," she said firmly. "Tomorrow. Tonight, if I can arrange it. And you're going to let me go. You're going to stand in that ballroom and tell them it was all a misunderstanding, that there was never anything between us, that Arabella Winters is a liar, but I'm leaving anyway because London doesn't suit me. That won't protect you. The gossip will follow you to Hampshire. You'll be ruined. Then I'll be ruined, but I'll be ruined on my own terms, not trapped in a marriage built on scandal and obligation." Marcus cleared his throat from the doorway. "I hate to interrupt, but you have about 30 seconds before people start coming to look for you. Whatever you're going to do, decide now." Clara looked at Sebastian, really looked at him, memorizing his face for the lonely years ahead. He was beautiful and broken, and trying so hard to be better than the role he'd been born into. Under different circumstances, in a different world, maybe they could have been something magnificent. But not in this world, not with these impossible obstacles. "Goodbye, Sebastian," she whispered. She pushed past Marcus into the corridor beyond, moving quickly before courage failed. Behind her, she heard Sebastian start to follow, heard Marcus stop him with quiet words she couldn't make out. The ballroom beckoned ahead, 300 witnesses waiting to watch her destruction. Clara straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and walked toward her execution with all the dignity she could muster. Let them talk. Let them judge. Let them destroy her reputation and her prospects and her naive hope that the world could be fair. She would survive. She always had, even if survival meant losing the one person who'd ever really seen her. The ballroom felt like a Roman Colosseum as Clara stepped through the doorway, 300 faces turning toward her with predatory anticipation. Conversations died mid-sentence. The quartet faltered, notes dissolving into discordant silence. Even the servants froze, silver trays suspended in mid-service. Arabella Winters stood at the center of the room like a queen holding court, surrounded by her usual coterie of followers. Her face radiated triumph. She'd finally landed the killing blow, and everyone knew it. Clara walked forward, each step measured and deliberate. Her hands didn't shake. Her spine remained straight. If she was going to be destroyed, she'd face it with dignity. "Miss Hamilton," Arabella's voice carried across the ballroom with theatrical clarity. "How kind of you to rejoin us. We were just discussing your close friendship with the Duke of Ravensbrück." "Were you?" Clara kept her voice level, conversational. "How fascinating that my friendships warrant such attention." "Oh, it's more than friendship, isn't it?" Arabella's smile was razor-sharp. "I saw you at the Pemberton ball, slipping into the Duke's private study, unchaperoned, for over an hour." The gasps were audible. Several older women clutched their fans. The men exchanged knowing looks, their expressions ranging from judgment to prurient interest. "That's a serious accusation," Clara said quietly. "It's the truth. I watched you enter. I noted the time. And when you finally emerged, your dress was rumpled and your hair was exactly as it is now. Plain, unfashionable, unremarkable." Clara's voice cut through Arabella's dramatics like ice through silk. "Rather like the rest of me, wouldn't you say?" The subtle insult landed. Arabella's cheeks flushed. "You're not denying it, then? The assignation?" "I'm questioning your eyesight, Miss Winters, and your credibility, because what you're describing never happened." "I know what I saw." "Do you?" "Because I was never alone with the Duke at the Pemberton ball. I spent the entire evening with my aunt, Lady Pemberton, who would be happy to confirm my whereabouts." Clara looked directly at Judith, who stood near the refreshment table with an expression of fierce maternal pride. "Isn't that correct, Aunt Judith?" Judith stepped forward, her voice carrying the authority of 40 years in society. "Entirely correct. Clara was never out of my sight for more than a few minutes, certainly not long enough for the sordid encounter Miss Winters is suggesting." "She's lying to protect her niece," Arabella hissed. "And you're lying to destroy a woman who's never done you any harm," Clara shot back, her calm finally cracking to reveal the steel beneath. "Tell me, Miss Winters, what exactly have I done to earn your hatred? Failed to defer to your beauty? Refused to acknowledge your superiority? Or simply committed the unforgivable sin of speaking to a man you wanted for yourself?" The accuracy of the accusation rippled through the crowd. Several people shifted uncomfortably. Arabella's manufactured charm evaporated, leaving naked malice. "You're a nobody from Hampshire who thinks she can compete with her betters," Arabella spat. "You're plain, poor, and pathetic, and the Duke will realize it soon enough. He's playing with you like a cat with a mouse. Everyone can see it except you." "Then everyone is blind," Sebastian's voice rang out from the ballroom entrance. "Or willfully ignorant. I'll let you decide which." He walked forward through the crowd, which parted for him automatically. Marcus followed 2 steps behind, his expression carefully neutral. Sebastian's face was composed, but his eyes blazed with controlled fury. "Your Grace!" Arabella's voice had lost its confidence. "I was simply lying." Sebastian stopped directly beside Clara, close enough that his sleeve brushed hers. "Inventing scandalous stories about a woman whose only crime is refusing to worship at the altar of wealth and status. I believe there's a word for that. Several words, actually, none of them appropriate for polite company. I saw nothing. You saw nothing, because nothing happened." Miss Hamilton and I had precisely 2 interactions at the Pemberton Ball, both public, both brief, both witnessed by dozens of guests. His voice dropped to something dangerous. But let's pretend for a moment that you actually believed your own fiction. Let's pretend you genuinely thought Miss Hamilton and I were conducting an inappropriate relationship. The proper response would have been to speak to me privately, or to Lady Pemberton, or to any of the chaperones present. Instead, you chose public humiliation, which tells me this was never about propriety. This was about cruelty. The ballroom had gone deathly quiet. No one moved. No one breathed. Miss Winters, Sebastian continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast room, you will apologize to Miss Hamilton, now. Or I will ensure that you and your family are never again welcome at any event I attend, any estate I control, or any social gathering where my influence matters, which, in case you've forgotten, is most of them. Arabella's face went white. Social exile from the Duke of Ravensbrück would be catastrophic. Her family's standing would crumble. Her marriage prospects would evaporate. Her entire world would collapse. Her voice came out as a whisper. I apologize, Miss Hamilton. I was mistaken. Speak up, Sebastian commanded. Everyone should hear this. I apologize. Arabella's voice cracked with humiliation and rage. I was wrong. There was no assignation. I saw incorrectly. And Clara should have felt triumphant. Instead, she just felt tired. This wasn't victory, it was mutual destruction, the inevitable result of society's vicious games. Thank you, Miss Winters, Clara said quietly. Apology accepted. She turned to leave, this conversation, this ballroom, this entire nightmare, but Sebastian's hand closed gently around her wrist. Wait, he said. Then, louder, addressing the room. Since we're all gathered here, witnessing Miss Hamilton's character being attacked and defended in equal measure, I have something to say. Sebastian, don't... Clara tried to pull away, but his grip tightened fractionally. For weeks, this city has been consumed with speculation about my relationship with Miss Hamilton. You've invented narratives, spread gossip, questioned her motives and my judgment. You've made her life miserable for the crime of being different, of refusing to conform to your narrow expectations. He paused, his eyes sweeping the crowd. And you've completely missed what was actually happening. Clara's heart hammered. No, he wouldn't. Not here, not like this. Miss Hamilton rejected me, Sebastian said clearly, repeatedly, thoroughly, without ambiguity. I pursued her despite her clear disinterest because I'm apparently too arrogant to accept no for an answer. I sent flowers, she returned. Invitations, she declined. I inserted myself into her life when she wanted nothing to do with me. If anyone in this room deserves censure, it's me. The confession stunned the ballroom into renewed silence. Dukes didn't admit failure. They didn't confess to rejection. They certainly didn't publicly acknowledge being wrong. But here's what you also missed, Sebastian continued, his voice softening. In rejecting me, Miss Hamilton taught me more about myself than 8 years as Duke ever did. She showed me that I'd been coasting on privilege without earning it, that I'd accepted a role without questioning what it should mean, that I'd surrounded myself with people who told me what I wanted to hear instead of what I needed to know. He turned to Clara, and she saw everything in his eyes, vulnerability, determination, something that looked dangerously like love. You asked me in the corridor what I needed from you, he said, speaking only to her now, the ballroom forgotten. I need you to know that I don't want to save you. I want you to save me from complacency, from becoming the empty aristocrat I was turning into, from a life of pleasant meaninglessness. His voice dropped to something raw. You don't need me, Clara. I know that. You're strong and brilliant and entirely self-sufficient. But I need you, desperately. Not because you're a challenge or a novelty, but because you're the first real thing I've encountered in a decade of carefully constructed performances. Clara felt tears threatening despite her best efforts. This isn't fair. I know. You're doing it again, making grand gestures. Forcing my hand. I'm telling the truth in front of 300 witnesses. If that's forcing your hand, I apologize, but I'm done with lies and games and pretending I don't feel what I feel. And what exactly do you feel? The question hung between them, heavy with possibility and consequence. Sebastian's thumb traced small circles on her wrist, the gesture intimate and unbearably tender. "I feel like I've been sleepwalking through life and you woke me up," he said simply. "I feel terrified and exhilarated and completely out of my depth. I feel like everything I thought I wanted was wrong, and the only thing that matters is standing right in front of me, looking at me like I'm insane." "You are insane." "Probably. But I'd rather be insane with you than sane without you." Clara became aware of the watching crowd, the absolute silence, the weight of expectation pressing down from all sides. This moment would define her, either as the woman who'd trapped a duke with public manipulation, or as the woman who'd walked away from everything society valued. "I can't marry you," she said, loud enough for the room to hear. "Not like this, not with everyone watching and judging and inventing narratives, not when half of them think I'm a schemer and the other half think you're a fool." "I don't care what they think." "But I do, because I'll be the one living with their judgment for the rest of my life. I'll be the unsuitable duchess, the constant reminder of your poor decision, and eventually you'll see me through their eyes and you'll wonder what you ever saw in me." "That will never happen." "You can't know that." "I can, because I've spent 2 weeks seeing myself through your eyes, and it was the most uncomfortable, necessary experience of my life." Sebastian released her wrist but didn't step back. "You think I'll change my mind when the novelty fades? Clara, there's nothing novel about you. You're stubborn and sharp-tongued and completely unimpressed by wealth and status. Those aren't fascinating quirks. They're fundamental parts of who you are. And they're exactly what I need." "Why?" The word came out as a whisper. "Why me? There are 100 women in this room who could challenge you, because you're the only one who's honest, the only one who looks at me and sees a man instead of a title, the only one who tells me when I'm being an arrogant fool instead of flattering my ego." He paused, something vulnerable crossing his face. "Because when I'm with you, I'm just Sebastian, and I'd forgotten what that felt like until you reminded me." Clara felt her defenses crumbling, felt the truth of his words resonating in her chest. But truth wasn't enough. Not in a world built on appearances and expectations. "Even if I believed you, even if I trusted that this is real and not some temporary infatuation, it wouldn't work. Your family would never accept me. Your peers would mock you. Every door that's currently open to you would close." "Let them close. I'll build new doors." "You say that now, Sit. I'll sign it in blood if necessary. I'll put it in writing. I'll stand in front of Parliament and declare it." His voice rose, passionate and reckless. "Clara, I will burn down everything I've built if it means proving to you that you matter more than any of it." "Don't!" The word came out sharp, almost frightened. "Don't make promises you can't keep. Don't!" "I already did it." Clara froze. "What?" Sebastian's expression shifted into something that might have been pride or might have been terror. "This afternoon, before the auction, I visited my solicitor and drafted a new will. Everything, the estates, the fortune, the properties, it's all being transferred into a trust that will be managed by a board of tenants and local leaders, instead of inherited by distant relatives who've never set foot on the land." The implications hit Clara like a physical blow. "You're dismantling your inheritance. I'm restructuring it, making it something useful instead of ornamental. The trust will maintain the properties, support the tenants, preserve the land. But the dukedom itself?" He shrugged. "That dies with me. No more accumulation of wealth and privilege by accident of birth. No more empty titles passed down to people who've done nothing to earn them." The ballroom erupted. Shocked gasps, angry mutters. Someone, probably a distant relative with inheritance expectations, let out a strangled sound of fury. "You've lost your mind," someone called out. "Probably," Sebastian agreed calmly, "but it's mine to lose." Clara stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. Dukes didn't dismantle their own legacies. They didn't redistribute wealth and power to tenants and commoners. They certainly didn't do it for a woman they barely knew. "Why?" she whispered. "Because you were right. About chains I didn't have to wear. About defining the role instead of letting it define me." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to something only she could hear. "And because I wanted to prove that I meant what I said. That I don't need the title or the fortune to be whole. That I choose you over all of it. That's insane. Yes, but it's done. The papers are signed. The trust is established. I can't take it back even if I wanted to. His gray eyes held hers with uncomfortable intensity. So now you know. This isn't about obligation or scandal or damage control. This is me, choosing you, consequences be damned. Clara felt something breaking open in her chest, a dam she'd built to protect herself from exactly this kind of vulnerability. Because Sebastian was offering her something she'd never dared want. Not rescue or security, but partnership. Equality. A complete upending of the social order that had always excluded her. You're asking me to believe that a duke would throw away everything for a woman he's known for 2 weeks, she said slowly. I'm not asking you to believe anything. I'm showing you. The papers exist. The trust is real. Whether you marry me or not, the changes are made. I'm not the duke I was 2 weeks ago. I'm someone else now, someone you helped me become. And if I still say no? Pain flashed across his face, but he didn't flinch. Then I live with it, and I try to be worthy of what you saw in me, even if you're not there to see it. The ballroom watched in breathless silence. Clara could feel the weight of their expectations, their judgments, their desperate need for this story to resolve in a way that made sense. But life didn't resolve neatly. Love didn't follow predictable patterns, and Clara Hamilton had never been predictable. I need time, she said finally. How much time? I don't know. More than 5 minutes in front of 300 witnesses. Fair enough. Sebastian stepped back, creating physical distance that felt like a chasm. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. Restructuring estates, proving myself worthy. Waiting. You can't just wait indefinitely. Watch me. Despite everything, the chaos, the scandal, the impossible situation, Clara felt a smile tugging at her mouth. You're insufferably stubborn. I learned from the best. The moment stretched between them, fragile and precious. Then Marcus cleared his throat from somewhere nearby. As touching as this is, he said dryly, we should probably address the rather large crowd of people who just witnessed the Duke of Ravensbrück essentially propose marriage and get rejected. Again. The reminder of their audience shattered the intimate bubble. Clara became aware of hundreds of eyes, dozens of open mouths, the sheer scandal of what had just transpired. I need to leave, she said abruptly. I'll have my carriage. No, I'll find my aunt. Clara trailed off, overwhelmed by the enormity of everything. I just need to leave. She turned and walked away before courage failed, before the tears threatening in her eyes could fall publicly. The crowd parted for her like the Red Sea, everyone too stunned to even whisper. Somewhere behind her, she heard Sebastian start to follow, heard Marcus stop him with quiet words. Judith materialized at her elbow, solid and reassuring. Come, darling, let's go home. They made it to the carriage before Clara's composure finally shattered. She collapsed onto the seat, shaking with sobs she'd been holding back for weeks. Sobs of frustration and fear, and something that felt dangerously like hope. He dismantled his inheritance, she choked out. He signed away his fortune, for me. I heard. Judith's arm came around Clara's shoulders, solid and maternal. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I don't know. Clara struggled for breath between sobs. What if he regrets it? What if he wakes up tomorrow and realizes what he's thrown away and he hates me for it? Then he's a fool. But I don't think he's a fool, Clara. I think he's a man who finally figured out what matters. But how can I trust it? How can I believe this is real when everything in my life has taught me that people like me don't get happy endings? Judith was quiet for a long moment, the carriage rocking gently as they traveled through London's darkened streets. Your mother asked me the same question when your father proposed. She was the daughter of an earl. He was a botanist with more passion than prospects. Everyone told her she was throwing her life away. What did you tell her? I told her that love is always a gamble, always a risk. But the only way to lose completely is to never place a bet. Judith squeezed Clara's shoulders. Your mother bet on your father. She had 15 years of happiness before she died, and not once in those 15 years did I hear her express regret. Even at the end, when she knew she was dying, she told me she'd do it all again. I'm not my mother. No, you're stronger. You've survived more. You've built a life without love because you were afraid to risk yourself. Judith's voice was gentle but firm. And now someone is offering you everything you've been too practical to want. The question isn't whether it's a risk. Everything worthwhile is a risk. The question is whether you're brave enough to take it. Clara leaned against her aunt, exhausted and terrified, and feeling like she was standing on the edge of a cliff in the dark. One step forward could be flight or falling, and she had no way to know which until she tried. The letter arrived the next morning, delivered by a footman in Ravensbrook livery. Clara recognized Sebastian's handwriting on the envelope, bold and slightly irregular, like everything else about him. She waited until after breakfast to open it, needing coffee and daylight to face whatever it contained. When she finally broke the seal, 3 documents fell out along with a single sheet of writing paper. The letter was brief. Clara, enclosed. You'll find copies of the trust documents I mentioned. I wanted you to see that I wasn't exaggerating or making empty promises. The changes are real and irreversible. You asked for time. Take all you need. But while you're thinking, I wanted you to know something I didn't say last night, something I should have said first. I love you. Not the idea of you. Not the challenge you represent. Not the way you make me want to be better. I love you, Clara Hamilton, stubborn and brilliant and completely herself in a world that demands conformity. I love the way you look at the world with curiosity instead of judgment. I love your honesty even when it's uncomfortable. I love that you rejected me repeatedly because it was the right thing to do, not because you didn't feel something too. You asked how you could trust this is real. Here's my answer. You can't. Trust is earned through time and consistency, and I haven't had enough of either yet, but I'm asking you to give me the chance to earn it, to prove that this isn't temporary infatuation or boredom or anything else you're afraid it might be. I'll wait as long as it takes. Yours, Sebastian. Clara read the letter 3 times, then turned to the documents. They were exactly as he'd described. Trust agreements establishing management boards, transferring properties, restructuring the entire Ravensbrook estate into something radically different from traditional aristocratic inheritance. He'd actually done it. Dismantled everything that made him powerful in society's eyes. For her. The magnitude of it was terrifying and exhilarating and completely overwhelming. Clara? Judith appeared in the doorway. You have a visitor. Several, actually. I'm not receiving anyone today. You'll want to receive these ones. Something in Judith's voice made Clara look up. It's Lady Thornbury, Mrs. Pemberton, and the Duchess of Marlborough. They're asking to see you personally. The names sent ice through Clara's veins. These were the arbiters of society, the women whose opinions shaped reputations and determined acceptability. Their visit could only mean one thing. They were here to deliver her social execution in person. Tell them I'm indisposed. Clara, they specifically requested to apologize. The word didn't make sense. Apologize? Apparently what happened at the auction last night has caused considerable reflection in certain circles. Judith's expression was carefully neutral. Shall I show them in? Clara nodded numbly, smoothing her dress and trying to prepare for whatever fresh humiliation awaited. The 3 women swept into the morning room moments later, their faces a mixture of discomfort and determination. Lady Thornbury spoke first, her usual imperious tone noticeably subdued. Miss Hamilton, thank you for seeing us. I'm not sure I had much choice. You did, and we appreciate your graciousness in receiving us despite everything. She paused, visibly uncomfortable. We've come to offer our apologies. Clara stared. I'm sorry? We were wrong about you, the Duchess of Marlborough said bluntly. We allowed Arabella Winters and her ilk to poison our judgment. We participated in gossip that was cruel and unfounded. And last night, we watched a man of principle defend you against accusations we should have questioned from the beginning. The Duke's actions toward you, dismantling his inheritance, publicly declaring his feelings, have made certain things clear, Mrs. Pemberton added. Either he's completely mad, or you're far more remarkable than we gave you credit for. He's not mad, Clara said quietly. No, which means we've been blind. Lady Thornbury stepped forward, her expression more genuine than Clara had ever seen it. Society has rules, Miss Hamilton. Many of them are ridiculous, but they serve a purpose. They give us structure, predictability, safety. But sometimes the rules are simply wrong, and this is one of those times. We'd like to sponsor you, the Duchess said. Officially, introduce you properly to society, not as a nobody from Hampshire, but as a woman of character who captured the attention of the Duke of Ravensbrook through integrity rather than manipulation. Clara couldn't process the words. They didn't make sense. These women, the same ones who'd stood by while she was verbally eviscerated, were offering to rescue her reputation? Why? She asked bluntly. Because we're tired of women like Arabella Winters setting the tone, Lady Thornbury said. We're tired of pretty faces and empty accomplishments being valued over substance. We're tired of watching good people destroyed for refusing to play games. She paused. And because Sebastian Darrow is one of the finest men in England, and if he loves you enough to give up everything for you, then we should have paid closer attention from the beginning. The offer hung in the air, tempting and terrifying. Social acceptance, rehabilitation, everything Clara had thought impossible suddenly within reach. But it came with conditions she couldn't ignore. If I accept your sponsorship, Clara said slowly, you'll expect me to marry the Duke. We'll expect you to make whatever choice is right for you, the Duchess corrected. But yes, we believe you should marry him, not because of propriety or scandal or social advantage, but because we watched you two together last night and we saw something rare, something worth protecting. And if I don't, if I still choose to return to Hampshire? The three women exchanged glances. Then you return with our blessing and our apology, Lady Thornbury said. And society will know that you were the woman who walked away from a duke because you valued authenticity over ambition. That's its own kind of power, Miss Hamilton. Clara felt tears stinging her eyes again. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it, both our offer and the Duke's proposal. Mrs. Pemberton smiled gently. You've earned the right to make your own choice without pressure. We just wanted you to know that whatever you choose, you won't face it alone. They left shortly after, leaving Clara alone with her whirling thoughts and impossible decisions. Through the window, she could see London spreading out in the morning light, beautiful and cruel and full of possibility. Somewhere in that sprawling city, Sebastian was waiting, hoping, proving himself worthy of something he'd never had to earn before. And Clara Hamilton, the plain woman from Hampshire who'd never asked for any of this, held all the power. The question was, what would she do with it? Clara spent 3 days thinking, pacing the confines of her aunt's townhouse like a caged animal. The sponsorship offer sat on her writing desk, a formal invitation on cream-colored paper that represented everything she'd never dared hope for. Sebastian's letter remained folded in her pocket, worn soft from constant rereading. And through it all, the question burned. What did she actually want? Not what was practical, not what was safe. What did Clara Hamilton, the woman, not the cautious survivor, actually want from her one wild, precious life? The answer terrified her. On the fourth morning, she woke before dawn with absolute clarity. She knew what she had to do, and the knowing felt like stepping off a cliff with no certainty of flight or falling. But her mother had taken that step, had bet everything on love and lived without regret. Clara could do no less. She dressed carefully in her best gown, still plain by society's standards, but clean and well-fitted. She arranged her hair with unusual care, and then she did something that would have scandalized every etiquette instructor in England. She went to Ravensbrook House, alone, uninvited, at 7 in the morning. The butler who answered the door looked at her with barely concealed shock. Miss Hamilton, I'm afraid His Grace is not receiving visitors at this hour. Tell him Clara Hamilton is here. Tell him I have an answer. She met the butler's eyes steadily. And tell him if he doesn't see me immediately, I'll stand on his doorstep and shout it for all of Mayfair to hear. The butler's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. One moment, miss. He returned within minutes, his expression carefully neutral. His Grace will see you in his study, if you'll follow me. The house was magnificent, all marble and oil paintings, and the accumulated wealth of 7 generations. Clara felt small walking through it, acutely aware of how alien this world was to her. But she didn't let the grandeur intimidate her. She'd survived worse than beautiful rooms. Sebastian's study was surprisingly modest compared to the rest of the house. Book-lined walls, a worn leather chair, papers scattered across the desk in organized chaos. He stood when she entered, and Clara's breath caught at the sight of him. He looked exhausted. His hair was disheveled, his cravat missing, his shirt open at the collar in a way that would have sent his valet into apoplexy. Dark circles shadowed his gray eyes. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. He looked beautiful. Clara. Her name came out rough, uncertain. I didn't expect... You said you needed time. I did. I took it. And now I have an answer. She closed the door behind her, propriety be damned. But before I give it, I need to say something. All right. You told me you loved me. In that letter, do you remember? Every word. I've been replaying them constantly, wondering if I said it wrong, if I should have waited, if... Sebastian, stop. Clara stepped closer, her heart hammering. Do you still mean it? Even now, knowing that I've made your life complicated and scandalous and completely upended? More than ever. Why? Help me understand why you'd give up everything for someone you barely know. Sebastian was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice was raw with honesty. Because knowing you changed me. Because I'd spent 8 years being the Duke of Ravensbrück without ever asking who Sebastian Darrow actually was beneath the title. Because you looked at all my wealth and privilege and remained completely unmoved, which forced me to figure out if there was anything about me worth loving beyond what I could offer. And is there? I don't know. But I want to find out. And I want to find out with you because you're the only person who's ever made me want to be more than adequate, more than sufficient. You make me want to be extraordinary. Clara felt tears threatening but forced them back. I'm not extraordinary. I'm plain and stubborn and completely unsuited to be a duchess. You're wrong about all three. But even if you weren't, I don't want a duchess. I want you. Those are the same thing. If we marry, I become a duchess whether I want to or not. Then we'll redefine what duchess means. We'll make it something real instead of ornamental. Sebastian stopped, frustrated. Clara, I'm trying to tell you that I'll change everything to make this work. The title, the expectations, the entire structure. Just tell me what you need. I need to know that in 5 years, when the novelty is worn off, and I'm still just Clara, still plain, still stubborn, still completely ordinary, you won't wake up and wonder what you were thinking. You're not ordinary. Yes, I am. And that's not a flaw, Sebastian. It's the truth. I'm not a grand romantic heroine. I'm just a woman who likes books and plants and quiet mornings. I'll never be beautiful or accomplished or any of the things a duchess should be. Good, because I've spent enough time around beautiful, accomplished women to know they're exhausting. Sebastian crossed the distance between them in 3 strides, his hands framing her face with devastating gentleness. Do you know what I see when I look at you? A mistake you'll regret. I see home. I see honesty. I see someone who tells me the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, who challenges me to be better, who doesn't care about my title or fortune or any of the things I can't control. His thumbs brushed her cheekbones. I see the person I want to build a life with, not because you're a duchess or a prize or a strategic alliance, but because you're you, and that's more than enough. Clara closed her eyes, letting the words wash over her. She wanted to believe him, desperately, dangerously wanted it. I'm scared, she whispered. Me too. What if we fail? What if this doesn't work and we end up miserable and trapped? Then we'll fail together, and at least we'll have tried. Sebastian's voice dropped to something achingly vulnerable. Clara, I've spent my entire adult life playing it safe, doing what was expected, following the prescribed path, and it left me empty. You're the first unsafe thing I've wanted in 8 years. Please don't ask me to go back to safe. Clara opened her eyes, meeting his gaze directly. I have conditions. Hope flared in Sebastian's expression. Anything. I won't give up my independence. I'll be your wife, but I won't be your possession. I'll have my own interests, my own pursuits, my own life beyond being the Duchess of Ravensbrück. Agreed. What else? I want to continue my father's botanical work. That land you bought at the auction, the charity can have the monetary value, but I want to use it to finish what my father started. Consider it done. I'll handle the arrangements with the Foundling Hospital. And I want, Clara paused, gathering courage. I want you to promise that if you ever regret this, you'll tell me, honestly. I'd rather know the truth and deal with it than spend years wondering if you're just being polite. Sebastian's expression turned fierce. I promise, though I suspect I'll be the one worried you'll regret settling for a reformed aristocrat who had to learn basic decency from a woman he was chasing. I'm not settling. Neither am I. They stood in the quiet study, the morning light streaming through windows onto worn rugs and leather-bound books. Outside, London was waking up. Carriages rattling past, servants beginning their daily routines, the city grinding into motion. But inside this room, time felt suspended. You haven't actually given me your answer yet, Sebastian said quietly. Clara took a breath, steadying herself for the leap. Ask me again, properly this time. Sebastian's hands fell away from her face. He stepped back, then, to Clara's utter shock, dropped to one knee. Sebastian, you don't have to. Yes, I do. You deserve the whole thing, the romance, the gesture, the moment you can remember when I inevitably do something stupid, and you need reminding that I actually love you. Despite everything, Clara laughed. Get on with it then. Clara Hamilton. Sebastian took her hand, his grip warm and solid and real. Will you marry me? Not because society expects it, not because of scandal or obligation or damage control, but because I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of you? The words hung in the air, irrevocable and perfect and terrifying. Clara squeezed his hand, feeling the calluses that had formed from his recent weeks of actual work on his estates. This wasn't the soft hand of an ornamental aristocrat. This was the hand of a man trying to become something real. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I'll marry you. Sebastian surged to his feet, pulling her into his arms with enough force to lift her off the ground. He spun her once, then caught her mouth in a kiss that was clumsy and desperate and absolutely perfect. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sebastian pressed his forehead to hers. I'm going to be a terrible duke, he said. Good. I'd be a terrible duchess anyway. We'll be terrible together. That's all I ever wanted. The engagement was announced the following morning in the Times, and London exploded. Half of society was scandalized. A duke marrying a nobody was unprecedented in recent memory. The other half was enchanted by the romance of it, the unconventional love story that had unfolded so publicly. And everyone had an opinion. But Clara found she didn't care about the opinions anymore. Let them gossip. Let them judge. She'd survived their worst and come out stronger. The wedding was planned for 6 weeks later, giving Clara barely enough time to adjust to her new reality. Lady Thornbury, the Duchess of Marlborough, and Mrs. Pemberton descended on her with military precision, determined to sponsor her entrance into society properly. They taught her the unspoken rules, introduced her to the right people, and ran interference with the crueler elements of the ton. You're a project, Lady Thornbury said bluntly during one particularly exhausting afternoon of social calls. Society loves a project. They'll tear you apart or build you up depending on how you perform. Our job is to ensure you perform brilliantly. I don't perform well under pressure. Then it's lucky you don't have to perform. You just have to be yourself. That's what captured the Duke's attention after all. But being herself in front of hundreds of critical eyes turned out to be harder than Clara anticipated. She stumbled through social events, said the wrong things, wore the wrong dresses. She was too honest, too blunt, too unwilling to engage in the delicate dance of implication and innuendo that governed polite conversation. And somehow, miraculously, it worked. People began to find her refreshing, authentic, a breath of fresh air in a world of calculated performance. The same qualities that had made her an outcast as a nobody made her fascinating as the future Duchess of Ravensbrück. They're inventing a narrative, Clara complained to Sebastian one evening as they walked through his estate gardens, properly chaperoned by her aunt, who trailed behind at a discreet distance. I'm not fascinating, I'm just too socially inept to lie convincingly. And they love you for it. Ironic, isn't it? Infuriating is more accurate. Sebastian laughed, the sound rich and genuine. Welcome to aristocratic society, where nothing means what it appears to mean, and success depends on things you can't control. How have you survived it for 8 years? Poorly. I told you, I was sleepwalking, going through motions without examining what any of it meant. He glanced at her, his expression softening. You woke me up, made me realize I could change the rules instead of just following them. And now you're dismantling everything your ancestors built. Now I'm building something new, something that might actually matter beyond preserving a bloodline. He paused at a bench, gesturing for her to sit. Speaking of which, I need to tell you something about the estate restructuring. Clara's stomach tightened with familiar anxiety. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, but there are complications I didn't fully anticipate. Sebastian sat beside her, his expression serious. Several distant relatives are contesting the trust. They're claiming I'm mentally unstable, that you've manipulated me, that the whole thing should be invalidated. Can they do that? They can try. It'll go to court, probably drag on for months. And in the meantime, every detail of our relationship will be examined publicly. He took her hand. I wanted you to know before we go any further. This might get ugly. Clara absorbed this new information, adding it to the growing list of complications that came with loving Sebastian Darrow. How ugly? They'll question your character, your motives, your sanity, and mine. They'll paint you as a schemer who seduced a vulnerable duke. They'll bring up every moment of gossip, every scandalous interaction, every piece of ammunition Arabella Winters and her ilk provided. So basically, more of what I've already survived. Worse, because this will be in court, on record, permanent. Clara studied Sebastian's face, seeing the worry there, the fear that this latest obstacle would be the one to break her. But she'd survived worse than legal battles. She'd survived being invisible, being dismissed, being nothing. Then we fight, she said firmly. We prove them wrong. We show them that love doesn't have to make sense to be real. Relief flooded Sebastian's expression. You're not afraid? Terrified, but I'm tired of running from fear. My mother taught me that some things are worth fighting for, even if the fight is brutal. She squeezed his hand. You're worth fighting for, Sebastian. This, us, is worth fighting for. I love you. I know. You keep saying it. Clara smiled despite the gravity of the conversation. I suppose I should say it back. Only if you mean it. I do mean it. I love you, even though you're infuriating and dramatic and you make everything more complicated than it needs to be. That's the most romantic declaration I've ever heard. I'm not romantic. You knew that when you proposed. No, you're just honest, which is better than romantic. Sebastian pulled her closer, despite Judith's presence 20 feet away. We're going to survive this, Clara. The court battle, the gossip, all of it. Because we survived everything else, and we're stronger together than they realize. Clara leaned into him, letting herself believe it. They would survive. They'd already proven that. The court proceedings began 3 weeks before the wedding, and they were exactly as brutal as Sebastian had predicted. Clara sat in the gallery, watching distant cousins and disappointed heirs parade through the witness stand with manufactured concern and thinly veiled greed. The Duke has clearly been compromised, one elderly relative testified. No man in his right mind would dismantle a legacy that has stood for 2 centuries unless he was being manipulated. And you believe Miss Hamilton is responsible for this manipulation? The lawyer asked. Who else? She appeared from nowhere, captured his attention through methods I can only imagine, and convinced him to give up his birthright. It's unconscionable. Or, Sebastian's lawyer countered during cross-examination, the Duke made an independent decision to restructure his holdings in a way that benefits hundreds of tenants instead of a handful of distant relatives who've never set foot on the properties. Which seems more likely, manipulation or altruism? The relatives sputtered, unable to answer without admitting their own greed. The trial dragged on for days, each session bringing new accusations and defenses. Clara endured it with the same stubborn resilience she'd brought to every other battle, refusing to be cowed by scrutiny or judgment. And slowly, the tide began to turn. Sebastian's tenants testified about his recent visits, his genuine interest in their welfare, his transformation from absent landlord to engaged steward. The trust documents were examined and found legally sound. Character witnesses, including Lady Thornbury, who gave a devastating assessment of the relatives' motivations, dismantled the manipulation narrative piece by piece, and then Arabella Winters was called to testify. She took the stand wearing her most innocent expression, ready to confirm that Clara was exactly the schemer everyone suspected. But Sebastian's lawyer was ready. Miss Winters, you accused Miss Hamilton of conducting an inappropriate relationship with the Duke. Is that correct? Yes. I saw them together, unchaperoned and compromising, and yet Lady Pemberton, who was actually responsible for chaperoning Miss Hamilton, testified that your accusation was false, that Miss Hamilton was never out of her sight for more than a few minutes. She was lying to protect her niece. Or you were lying to destroy a woman you perceived as competition. The lawyer's voice was sharp. Tell me, Miss Winters, how many times did you attempt to secure the Duke's attention for yourself before Miss Hamilton arrived in London? Arabella's face flushed. I don't see how that's relevant. It's extremely relevant. You pursued the Duke unsuccessfully, then accused the woman who did capture his attention of manipulation. That sounds less like concern for His Grace's welfare and more like jealousy. I was trying to protect him from a fortune hunter who rejected his proposals multiple times, who returned his gifts, who attempted to leave London to avoid his attention. The lawyer let the contradictions hang in the air. Miss Winters, I suggest that the only manipulation occurring was your attempt to destroy Miss Hamilton's reputation through false accusations. The testimony unraveled from there. Arabella's lies became obvious under scrutiny, her motivations transparent. By the time she left the stand, her credibility was destroyed. The judge's ruling came 2 days later. The trust was valid, the restructuring would stand, and the relatives' challenge was dismissed with prejudice. Sebastian's transformation of the Ravensbrook estate was legal, binding, and irreversible. Clara learned about the victory from Sebastian himself, who burst into her aunt's drawing room with the judgment papers and a grin that split his face. We won, he said simply. Clara felt something loosen in her chest, tension she'd been carrying for weeks. It's really over? It's really over. The estate is restructured. The tenants have security. And you... He pulled her into his arms, judgment papers crinkling between them. You survived another battle and came out stronger. We survived it. Yes, we. Sebastian kissed her forehead, then her nose, then finally her mouth. 3 more weeks until the wedding. Think you can survive 3 more weeks of society's attention? If I survive that trial, I can survive anything. She was wrong about that, but not in the way she feared. The wedding took place on a gloriously sunny June morning at St. George's Church in Hanover Square. Clara wore a gown that Lady Thornbury had commissioned, simple but elegant, more suited to Clara's personality than any of the elaborate confections that had been suggested. Her hair was arranged simply, decorated with small white flowers from the Ravensbrook estate gardens. She looked, by society's standards, unremarkable, and she looked, by Sebastian's standards, absolutely perfect. The church was packed with everyone who mattered in London society, those who'd supported them, those who'd opposed them, and those who'd simply wanted to witness the scandal firsthand. Clara walked down the aisle on her aunt's arm, aware of every eye tracking her progress, every whisper assessing her worthiness. But when she reached the altar and saw Sebastian waiting, his face open and vulnerable and full of love, every doubt dissolved. "Hello," he whispered as she took her place beside him. "Hello yourself." The ceremony was traditional, the vows ancient and binding. Clara spoke hers clearly, meaning every word. When Sebastian slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple gold band engraved with both their initials, she felt the weight of it like a promise. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the vicar intoned. "You may kiss the bride." Sebastian cupped her face in his hands, his gray eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I love you, Clara Darrow. I love you too, even though you're absolutely insane. Especially because I'm insane. Normal was boring." He kissed her then, in front of 300 witnesses, and Clara kissed him back without reservation or fear. This was real. This was right. This was the leap her mother had taken, and Clara was flying. The reception was held at Ravensbrook House, transformed for the occasion into something magical. But the most extraordinary moment came not during the formal celebration, but during a quiet interlude when Sebastian pulled Clara away from the crowds. "I have a wedding gift for you," he said, leading her to his study. "Sebastian, we agreed. No extravagant gifts." "It's not extravagant. It's necessary." He handed her a leather portfolio, his expression nervous. "Open it." Inside were the deeds to the Hampshire property, the land that had started everything. But they'd been modified, transferred not to charity, but to Clara herself, in her own name, with full ownership and control. "You said you wanted to continue your father's work," Sebastian said quietly. "This is your space to do it. No interference, no oversight from me or anyone else. Just yours." Clara stared at the documents, overwhelmed by the gesture. "This is too much. It's not nearly enough, but it's a start." He wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "I want you to have your own purpose, your own passion, your own life beyond being my duchess. Because that's not all you are, Clara. You're a botanist's daughter with your father's curiosity and your mother's courage, and I want to see what you build with that." Clara turned in his arms, tears streaming freely now. "How did I get so lucky?" "Luck has nothing to do with it. You fought for this, survived for this, earned every bit of happiness you're getting." Sebastian wiped her tears gently. "And I get to spend the rest of my life watching you be extraordinary." "I'm not. You are. You just needed someone to see it." 5 years later, Clara stood in the Hampshire botanical gardens she'd built on her land, surrounded by rare specimens her father had collected and new varieties she'd cultivated herself. The research greenhouse gleamed in the morning sun, filled with projects that had attracted attention from botanists across Europe. She was, by society's standards, a peculiar duchess. She spent more time in her gardens than in London ballrooms. She published papers under her own name rather than her husband's. She maintained her independence with a stubbornness that scandalized traditionalists and inspired younger women. And she was, by every measure that actually mattered, happy. "There you are." Sebastian appeared in the greenhouse doorway, slightly out of breath. "I've been looking everywhere. I told you I'd be working on the new specimens." "I know, I forgot. I'm still terrible at remembering schedules." He crossed to her, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Marcus is here. With news about the trust board, they've successfully negotiated water rights for the northern tenants." "That's wonderful." "It is. Your organizational system is working better than anyone expected." Sebastian studied her face, reading her mood with the ease of long practice. "Something's wrong." "Nothing's wrong. I'm just—" Clara set down her pruning shears, choosing words carefully. "I'm happy. Genuinely, completely happy. And it still surprises me sometimes." "Why?" "Because I spent so many years believing happiness wasn't meant for people like me, that I should be grateful for safety and contentment and not reach for more." She leaned into Sebastian's embrace. "You taught me to reach for more." "You taught yourself. I just held the ladder." Clara laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "That's the worst metaphor you've ever attempted." "I know. I'm getting worse with age." "Lucky you have a wife who loves you anyway." "Luckiest man in England." They stood together in the greenhouse, surrounded by growing things and afternoon light, and Clara felt the truth of it settle deep in her bones. She'd survived the hostile wilderness of London society. She'd fought battles everyone said she'd lose. She'd bet everything on love and won more than she'd ever dreamed possible, not because Sebastian had saved her, but because she'd saved herself and found someone who loved her for exactly that strength. "I have news," Clara said abruptly. Sebastian pulled back to look at her face. "Good news or concerning news?" "Depends on your perspective." She took his hand, placing it on her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby." The words hung in the greenhouse air, huge and irrevocable and perfect. Sebastian's eyes went wide, his expression cycling through shock, joy, and something that looked like terror. "A baby," he repeated numbly. "A baby. Due in about 7 months, according to the physician." Clara watched his face anxiously. "Are you happy? You look like you might faint." Sebastian seemed to remember how to breathe. I'm terrified and ecstatic and completely overwhelmed. So normal for you. Exactly normal for me. He pulled her close, his hand still pressed to her stomach. We're going to have a baby, a tiny human who'll call me father and expect me to know what I'm doing. You'll figure it out. You always do. Only because I have you to keep me honest. Lucky you. They stayed like that, holding each other in the greenhouse while the future unfolded around them, not perfect, never perfect, but real and hard-won and absolutely theirs. Clara had learned that survival wasn't about avoiding risk or staying safe. Survival was about fighting for what mattered, even when the odds were impossible. Even when society said you didn't deserve it. Especially then. The plain woman from Hampshire had become a duchess, a botanist, a force of nature, who changed an entire estate's structure and inspired a generation of women to reach for more than they'd been told to want. She'd survived London's cruelest season and emerged not just intact, but triumphant. And she'd done it not by becoming someone else, but by being completely, unapologetically herself. That, in the end, was the real victory. Not the title or the estate or the social acceptance, just the simple revolutionary act of taking up space in a world that had told her she was too ordinary to matter. Clara Hamilton Darrow mattered. She'd proven it, and she was done apologizing for it. Years later, when their daughter asked about how they'd met, Clara told her the truth. Not a sanitized fairy tale, but the real story of two broken people who'd found each other in the middle of a battlefield and decided to fight together instead of alone. Was it hard? Their daughter asked. Being so different from everyone else? Impossibly hard, Clara said honestly, but also worth it, because being different meant being real, and real is always better than perfect. Your mother is the wisest person I know, Sebastian added from his chair by the fireplace, gray now threading through his dark hair, but his eyes still sharp and loving. Which is why I married her despite her complete lack of interest in my money. You married her because she was the only person brave enough to tell you the truth, their daughter said with the confidence of someone who'd heard this story many times. That too, Clara watched her family, her impossible, precious family, and felt gratitude so fierce it was almost painful. She'd gambled everything on love and won a life beyond anything she'd imagined in those dark London days when survival felt like the best she could hope for. She'd been wrong about so many things, about what she deserved, about what was possible, about the limits of her own courage. But she'd been right about the most important thing. Love was always a risk worth taking, even when the odds were impossible, especially then.